It was very clear watching this movie that Hollywood, and especially the director, Robert Wise, was very excited about the new technology that the film industry had in making these sci-fi movies. I mean, a year before, Star Wars had just came out, and it looked incredibly awesome. I should say 2 years before, Star Wars 77, and Star Trek, the motion picture, came out in 79. But like I said, it is clear that Robert Wise, and probably all of Hollywood at this time, was excited about the new technology that was coming out to allow them to do these science fiction movies, once again, with great clarity and detail, and they make them as realistic as possible. So let's get into Star Trek, the motion picture, which is an appropriate name, the motion picture, because if they didn't have that attached to the name, you would just think that this was an extended show of the TV series Star Trek. This movie came out roughly 10 years after Star Trek went off the airs, got discontinued, and then we have this big comeback. I imagine the process was that Paramount saw the extreme popularity of Star Wars, was looking for a sci-fi movie of themselves that could compete, that they could cash in on this excitement that viewers had, that movie audiences were going for. And hey, in their back pocket, they had Star Trek, and so they made a motion picture out of it. Let's just say this right off the bat, this movie looks very good. Especially for 1979, it looked awesome, and the special effects that they used still holds up today. I mean, you still can kind of tell, the methods they used, but it still looks very realistic. And in some ways, they improved on the techniques that George Lucas used for Star Wars. I mean, you actually have people moving around in a spacecraft while it's being shot outside, and those scenes hold up very well. So visually, I would say it still holds up to today's standards. Even feels a bit more, because now when you watch a lot of these outer space movies, like Marvel and stuff, the CGI is so overloaded that it does feel more 2D-ish. But back then, you didn't really have CGI, so they had to use practical effects, which gave everything real texture and shape and feel to them. And this is what Star Trek really does. And if we're going to compare it to Star Wars a little bit more, unlike George Lucas and his vision of Star Wars, where, it's futuristic, you got spaceships, everything still look kind of dirty, like it's been used. But in the original picture here, Star Trek, everything looks pristine, clean, brand new, no dirt whatsoever. So they kind of still kept that aspect of these science fiction type of movies, if I'm going to make a comparison. But like I said, in a lot of ways, when you compare this movie to the 1977 Star Wars, you got 2 years, it looks just as good in many ways. In some ways, it goes above. And there are some scenes where it looks a little bit lesser than Star Wars. But overall, visually, Star Trek, the motion picture, holds up fantastically, in my humble opinion. If you've seen this recently, let me know what you think. Now, going on to the movie plot itself, this is a very slow movie. The last time I saw this movie I was probably like 5 or 6. And I would say that I was a big Star Wars movie because it had more action to it, while this one is very slow moving. I kept on waiting for stuff to happen in this movie for some kind of action, and the most action you get is probably in the first 5 minutes when the Klingon ship gets destroyed by this UFO. I'm going to call it a UFO, unidentified flying object here. Nobody knows what it is. So it's a slow burn, but it's like a mystery as well. And if you like mysteries, this is going to be, and you've never seen a Star Trek movie before, and you want to dive into this, if you're a mystery lover, you're going to like this, because they're trying to figure out what this thing is, why it's going around destroying planets and other spacecrafts, and what its drive is, what it is, its motive. This slow burn also, though, does help. Like I said, this movie came out 10 years after the TV series was discontinued. Well, roughly 10 years, I would just say that. So, the first part of the movie, we're getting reintroduced to a lot of these characters. And for probably a lot of people at this time, it is roughly a decade. Maybe have never seen a Star Trek movie before, and they were there because they're sci-fi fans. So it gave them opportunity to get introduced to these characters that were on TV. So that was a good thing, seeing these characters get reunited. I mean, for me, I'm not really a Trekkie, I would say, but I do know the characters. But it was nice to see them being reunited, and that's how this movie basically handles these opening scenes with these characters. They're being reunited without seeing each other for a long time. Get a little backstory on Spock, what he's been doing in his home planet, and Spock becomes an important character because he's the Falcons are very logical, and he's a logical thinker, and they're dealing with this identity, this thing that is very logical in its way of doing things. You get introduced to Shatner and Captain Kirk, I should say, I guess. I still like the Doctor. The Doctor's still one of my favorite characters of the series. And I do, as a Star Trek fan, I'm a light Star Trek fan. I'm going to say me a hardcore one. But I do prefer, when I do watch Star Trek, the original over the other Star Treks. I know that I think the Next Generation is probably the biggest fan base now. I'm assuming. But for me, I love the original Star Trek and the original characters. And so it's good to see them all together and how they reunited them for this movie. My first Star Trek movie is The Wrath of Khan, the second one. So I think I'm going to plan on revisiting this franchise. Overall, I think the movie's good. It does feel like an extended hour-and-a-half TV show. Just because how slow it is and how they're moving, and like the topic that they're covering is stuff that they would cover in the TV series. But visually, it looks great. Historically, spoiler alert here, this thing is over nearing in on 50 years old. It's like 47 years old right now. We're talking about the Voyager, and the Voyager was this, for those of you who don't know, was this spacecraft, this satellite thing that NASA sent out with information from Earth, sent out to outer space to, in case it gets intercepted by aliens, for them to know what Earth is like, and also maybe to gather information for us Earthlings about what's going on out there. And so it's basically the Voyager returning home, looking for that last thing, what is its purpose, and what it is made to do. You got a weird sequence at the end where a new life is formed, which I don't think that's how it happens. But, you get that aspect of it too. But historically, it was about, we're in a time period, maybe a little bit more at the tail end of this time period, where Americans were very interested in outer space, what it's out there, what it doesn't contain. It was basically in pop culture at this time. Star Wars helped revive that, put it back in the forefront after landing on the moon. So you still had that culture phenomenon going on, but I would say it's at its latter days, at that latter end of that era. But so they kind of brought that back to life with Voyager, returning, hundreds of years after it was released. Overall, it's a very slow movie, visually great. If you're expected to pick up, explosions, outer space fighting, you're not going to get that. Just go into it, watch an old episode of Star Trek and just say, okay, this is like an hour and a half, 2 hour version of that. Overall, though, kind of enjoyed it. I'm going to revisit some of these classic Star Trek movies and see what they're like. And because it's been about 40 years since I've seen them. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Let me know in the comments below. Did you guys like Star Trek? Did you like the original? What's your thoughts on the motion picture? Interested to know. Have a great day, and until next time, bye.